So I've had the Looper X at home for a week or so to have a little play with, and my job was to basically see how I might use it on a gig. I do a few different types of gigs, and the thing that I thought this would be most suitable for is quite often I play with singer-songwriters and other artists as a kind of general kind of dog's body, and I might be playing 3 or 4 different instruments on a gig. So some acoustic guitar, a bit of electric, maybe some pedal steel, mandolin, double bass, whatever it might be. And often on those kind of gigs, my job is to be a kind of like a foundational thing. So I'm almost doing like pads and synth parts as well as playing regular guitar stuff. And I thought it would be interesting to look at this as a kind of standalone solution to gigs like that. So I want to look at the internal effects, some of the routing options you've got. I think the looping and everything has been done very well in the video that Lee and Pete have already done this. So there's a link to that up there. I'm going to start looking at the internal effects, and we're going to start by looking at them with an acoustic guitar. So I've got this here, which is, a Sheeran model by Loudon, which seemed appropriate for this video. First of all, I'm going to look at the utility stuff. So the kind of thing that I look for just to fix problems when I'm on an acoustic gig. So if we come into the main menu here, this is going to take us into the effects. Okay, so at the moment, this guitar is plugged in the back here onto input 1, and we're looking at it here on track 1. So if I go into track 1 here and look at the effects. Now, the effects chain that I've got in here at the moment is Ed's rack. So this is kind of his choice of effects modules. Before I go any further, there's a couple of things in here that would offer a bit more flexibility, but they're not available. So when you want the effects, so say the 4-band EQ here is really nice for acoustic. I'll go into how to use that in a second. You have to use it in this effects chain, and I'll come on to more of that in a bit. But let's look at the EQ for now. So the EQ on this guitar, I've set it, you've got 4 bands of EQ down the side here, and in here you can select the EQ frequency, you can select the Q, which is the kind of width of the equalization that you're affecting, so the frequency range that you're affecting. And then you've got boost and cut. And you've also got high cut on the top, and you've got low cut on the bottom, so that's kind of a high pass filter. You can either adjust it just by going in and touching the display there, or by selecting one and then using the wheel here to adjust it. So if we go for the low cut, we don't want it that high, do we? But we don't need much above kind of 80, 90 hertz. If I turn the reverb off now, we can hear it a bit more. The touchscreen on here is pretty responsive. I do like it. You can't change the order of the effects within the effects rack, which is not the end of the world, but it would be nice if that flexibility was there. But looking through the EQ here, so I've done a bit of a... You can hear there I've cut the low mids, so if we boost that up again, you can hear it's quite an effective EQ. Probably cut that too much there. But it means that you can just EQ the guitar so it sounds nice to your ears, which I've done on this one. Which is very useful. The reverb that's available in this effects rack is fine. I wouldn't go for a box one probably. Go for the hall, maybe make it a bit nicer. And you've got the mix here. So all of these controls are very easily maybe a little big, but we'll see. Maybe take the time down a bit. But it's very easy to go in and adjust all these effects. I just wish you could kind of have a bit more adjustment over them, but there we go. So in here we've also got delays, chorus, there's an overdrive. The compressor's quite nice if you're going to be doing a lot of strumming. Let's see what that sounds like. Put a thumb pick on, shall I? Just a useful thing to have a compressor in there. But there we go, that's one effect kind of chain that we can use for the acoustic. You can only use one effects chain per track. So you have to make a decision there, and you have to choose what you're going to use kind of straight away. But you can route any input to any of the tracks. So at the moment, I've got the acoustic routed to tracks 1 and 2, and I've got the electric routed to tracks 3 and 4. And I'll show you quickly how we do that, and then we'll look at some of the other effects that I'm using on the other channels. So if you come back to the main menu here and go into the audio routing setting, you've got your inputs, which means that you can assign dry sends to the outputs. So this is all very practical stuff if you're if you're doing kind of a lot of live shows and you want to take independent feeds for your front of house guy to mix or whatever that might be. For now though, we're going to go to the track, and you can see here you've got your inputs, which is basically you're choosing which inputs are seen by each track. So I've chosen input 1 for tracks 1 and 2, which is my acoustic, and input 3 for track 3 and 4, which is the electric. But that could be, pedal steel or bass or whatever it might be. Go back to your effects window, Ed's rack here. So if I'm going to remove this now, and I'll show you the whole process of adding effects to things. So if we go to track 2, select track 2, turn the effects on, add. So in here, we've got Ed's rack, which is that chain I just showed you, and then there's these kind of suggested vocal chains for different things. So you've got vocal, guitar, lo-fi, dub, drum, studio rhythmic, and vocal tuner, as well as the single effects one. So each of those have got a kind of tailored chain of effects that will, genre specific sort of. If we go to the single effects, you get to see all the effects that are available. So if we choose something like, how about the octave pedal? So that comes in, that is part of now Ed's rack. That's where the octave pedal lives. So if you want to have it on your track, you need to have it as part of that effects chain. Not ideal, but it's okay. So I'll turn the EQ on here and see what that sounds like. So now we've got the octave on there. Ooh, I forgot I was in drop D then. And then you can turn those effects on and off by having the pedal assign. The default setting is that all the effects get toggled on and off when you hit the effects pedals. So if I go in here, that just turns the whole thing off. You can see it goes dark there, brings it back on. So that's the acoustic things. EQ, bit of reverb, bit of compression, all very useful. Let's look at the amp sims, because again, on the kind of gigs where I'm taking multiple instruments, they're not necessarily in venues that are that suitable for using real amps. And also, if I'm taking a pedal steel and 2 guitars and a looper board, I've got enough to carry without taking an amp as well. So let's have a look at the amp options. We're going to track 3 for that, which is where we're set up. I've chosen the guitar chain because that seemed to be, a sensible option. The amps in here, there's not an extensive selection, but there's a few, and you've got basically controls over drive, bass, treble, the modern setting, which I think, well, we'll see what that does, and then cab size. So I had a 1x8 cab going on the last one here, so, and I'll turn the drive off, and it's got a spring reverb here rather than the kind of room reverb that we had on the last one with the hall chamber room box. This is just springs. You've got spring mix and then you've got spring time. So it's probably a little long. Take the mix down a bit. The drive on here, the Q, what is that? Oh, overdrive, not Q drive, O drive. You can make that quite heavy. It's probably too much there. It will work if I turn it on. And you've got delays in here as well. So you can get a bit John Martin-y on that if you need to. Like I say, it would be really nice if you could change the order of effects. Maybe that's something they'll address in an update. The modulation in here as well is pretty good. There's no tremolo, which for me is a bit annoying because I like, I love tremolo on electric. But you've got chorus, the phase is pretty good. Where are we here? So for the kind of thing that I'd be using it for when I'm using like ambient type kind of atmospheric effects, it's a it's a nice phaser for it. So that's that's where I'm coming from. There's some really great effects in some of the other channels, and this is where I wish that we could change it a bit, because there's things like the dub channel here, which has got some really nice ambient reverbs and the dub verb and the dub delay and the doubler. There's a lot of dubs in that sentence, aren't there? But you get that kind of which works particularly nicely on kind of acoustic stuff actually, if you're doing, I mentioned John Martin before. So now, if I want to use, there we go. So now I've added the acoustic to that channel so I can use those same effects. And I really like the way the kind of dubby effects, you know, float off into modulation and kind of lo-finess. So there we go, that's some of the effects that you can use. The looping stuff, I think Pete's covered that really well because he's much better at looping than I am. Looking at the different looper modes, Pete, I think do you normally use sync? Sync, yeah, which is this mode here, which gives you 4 looper tracks. You kind of have a master track which sets the length, and then you can have other tracks which are multiples or kind of half the length of that first track, I believe. Band mode, well, song mode is when you have 4 looper tracks varying in lengths and playback independently. So this is when you're setting up different sections of a song, you know, verse, chorus, bridge or whatever. The band mode is quite good because it's a combination of the two. So if you set up a rhythm track, say, you can have that running on first track, and then you can set up 3 different sections on tracks 2, 3 and 4 and switch between them. And then we've got the free section, which is unsynced looper tracks, which you can make ambient soundscapes from. I have played with this a little bit. I've not seen any other videos about it, so I thought I'd try it. I'm just going to discard all my changes, go to free mode, and then we'll see if what I end up with is a horrific noise, which is always the danger when you're doing things that aren't synced at all. But what I'm going to do for this, I'm going to go super ambient. Let's try studio. What's in studio? Reverb, yes. Let's turn that on. Tons of reverb. Let's see, that's probably too much reverb, isn't it? 14 seconds. Let's go for that. We'll go for a delay on there, and the delay is going to have a nice long delay. Where are we? Try that one. We're going to go for a mod, and the mod's going to be, oh, there is okay, so there is tremolo. I was lying. There's tremolo in the studio setting on the mod pedal, but not in the guitar one. I don't understand that really, but there we go. It's a shame. That would be nice if it was there, but it's not. Okay, let's try that and see how that sounds. So you can set up a kind of bed with your weird effects. And then if we go to track 2, let's add some effects to track 2 as well. But that's quite a nice kind of low rhythmic drone, right? Let's go into my dub channel for this one. My dub, verb, dub, all of my dub stuff. So you can see, I mean, I don't know if this is a particularly entertaining video to watch now, but you can see with the free mode, you've got your tracks all run independently of each other. They're not synced at all, which if you're trying to build up ambient soundscapey type things is great, but you need to be really careful because you can go out of time and out of key with yourself really easily, I discovered when I was playing with this. But you saw in there as well, I added some effects afterwards. So I did a post effects. So you can either have the effects running pre your recording track or after the recorded track, so you can change the effects at a later date. So I'll just stop that going on in the background as some kind of weird, moody Halloween backing music. But the free mode, I think, if you're looking to create kind of sound beds for things, it would be a really easy and really cool way to do that, especially if you can kind of get your head around how the effects chains all work. I've had a bit of a chance to do it, but like I've mentioned this before, it'd be really nice to be able to pull in your favourite effects from each chain to make your own effects chain, but that's not available at the moment. But there we go, that's the Looper X, and that's the beginning of what I might do with it if I was to use it on a lot of gigs. It's built like a tank. I know that's been mentioned in every review, but it's really solidly built, and it seems like, my impression of it is it's an incredibly well made, well thought out piece of gear for, you know, doing looping stuff. As I said, I'm not really a looping expert by any means, but this is a very practical way. And once you get your mind around the menus and how they work, it's pretty intuitive. Touchscreen's good, the tuner's good. You can store huge amounts of audio on it. And if you are using backing tracks and stuff, it's very easy to do that. I know that I was talking to Pete and Lee earlier. They're saying that, you know, importing things like drum loops in is super easy. But I wanted to go at it from a more of a, not organic is the wrong word, but the angle where you're providing all the noise yourself and being kind of backup to someone else and using it for that. If I had a month to play with it, I might come up with some more things on there. What it does remarkably well. I just wish there was a little more flexibility in the effects routing and the effects chains. But the effects that are there are good, especially now I found the tremolo. Yeah, so that is the Sheeran Looper X and how I might use it for acoustic. I'd be interested to see how you might use it if you're using it in a kind of slightly more unusual way to the standard looper setup. So there we go. Click like and subscribe, all that kind of thing. You know the drill by now, but there we go. The Sheeran Looper X.